The people on the FBI's wanted lists range from those who have taken the lives of other people to criminals who have stolen millions of dollars from unsuspecting victims. The one thing they all have in common is that they've managed to avoid law enforcement, often even though their name and face have been featured on news broadcasts and papers. Number 5. November 9th, 1998 was supposed to be the day that John Rufo began a 17-and-a-half-year prison sentence. Instead, he drove a rented car to JFK Airport and disappeared without a trace, and he hasn't been seen since. Rufo was described as an extremely intelligent and successful businessman. He won a scholarship to attend New York University and earned a degree in computer science. After graduating, he started a company in the growing computer industry. At one point, he even worked with the FBI. His company was used as a front while they investigated Soviet agents. By the late 1990s, he was married and seemed to be living an ordinary life. His business, Consolidated Computer Services, allowed the couple to live comfortably, but they didn't stand out as particularly wealthy. Rufo's wife had no idea that he'd been betting millions on the stock market and had hidden more money away. In 1993, Rufo and a friend named Edward Rainers had come up with a scheme to make themselves rich. They both thought that they could be successful stockbrokers, but didn't have the funds to get started. They figured that they could borrow that money from banks, earn money on the stock market, then pay back the loans and reinvest their profits. They just needed a way to borrow money. Rainers had previously worked at the Philip Morris Company and still had a lot of his old connections, some of which didn't know that he no longer worked there. The criminals went to banks claiming that Philip Morris was working on a top-secret project, codenamed Project Star. It was so secret that even most staff at Philip Morris didn't know about it. The project was a smokeless cigarette. The company just needed some money to buy computers from Rufo's company, and then they could start the project. Because it was so top secret, the banks couldn't go to any other Philip Morris staff member, so they couldn't confirm whether or not the project even existed. One bank asked for a certificate signed by an executive, indicating that Rainers had permission to do deals on the company's behalf. Rufo and Rainers contacted an executive at the company named Diane McAdams and told her she'd won a competition run by the local radio station, and she needed to sign a release form. With this signed form, Rainers was able to go back to the banks and secure the loans for the non-existent project. He and Rufo spent money on the stock market, but it turned out that they didn't know the market as well as they thought they did. Rainers also spent his share of the money living a lavish lifestyle that included a penthouse apartment at Trump Tower. After 3 years, someone finally decided to look a little deeper into Project Star. An executive at a Japanese bank spotted some discrepancies in the paperwork he was given. He asked to speak to Diane McAdams. Rainers and Rufo tried to get one of Rufo's employees to play the part of Diane, but when they showed up at the meeting, they were arrested. Rufo's employee was later released, as she had no involvement in the plot. Rainers and Rufo were both charged with fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Rufo was considered a flight risk, and his bail was set at $10 million. His wife, mother-in-law, and some aunts and uncles put up their house as collateral, and Rufo was released on bail. In April of 1998, Rufo pleaded guilty, just days before his trial was supposed to start. But the prosecution had agreed to allow Rufo to self-surrender at the start of his 17-and-a-half-year prison sentence. He wore an ankle monitor and appeared to be following all the conditions he had been set. But in the background, he was preparing for his escape. On November 9th, Rufo rented a Ford Taurus to run the last couple of errands he needed to do before turning himself in. He dropped his wife off at the train station, then went to the courthouse in Brooklyn to return the ankle monitor. As far as anybody but Rufo was concerned, his next destination should have been a federal prison in New Jersey. Instead, he drove to an ATM in Queens, where he was caught on CCTV, taking out $600 from a bank account. He then went to JFK Airport, parked in long-term parking, and disappeared. When Rufo didn't show up at the prison, authorities contacted his wife, but she had no idea where he was. None of his friends or family had any idea he'd been planning to run away. If they had, they likely wouldn't have put up their homes for his bail. As it was, his own parents, wife, and other family members were left homeless as he had skipped bail. Authorities determined that there was about $21 million that had been stolen as a part of the Project Star scheme, which couldn't be accounted for. It was possible that Rufo had access to the cash and had used that to start a new life. In the decades since his disappearance, authorities and Rufo's family have been searching for him. His family wants an answer to how their loved one could betray them. Authorities want him to serve his prison sentence. In 2021, there was hope that Rufo might be found. His cousin spotted a man who resembled the fugitive while watching a Los Angeles Dodgers game, but unfortunately authorities couldn't determine if this was the man they were looking for. Rufo is still wanted by the US Marshals and the FBI. He's described as being 5'6" and of a medium build. He needs glasses and wore thick-framed glasses for most of his life. He also has short, wide feet and required size 8 EEE shoes, which would have to be custom-made. Rufo had ties to Italy, but could be anywhere in the world. He would be 68 years old today. Anyone with information can contact the U.S. Marshals Service at 1-877-926-8332. There's a $25,000 reward for information. Number 4. In 2018, hundreds of criminals around the globe were arrested after a sting operation lasting 3 years came to an end. The crimes ranged from money laundering to moving illegal substances to more violent crimes, but they all had one thing in common. The criminals had communicated using the encrypted Anam app, never realizing that Anam was operated by the FBI. But of the hundreds of people who were arrested, some of those responsible for spreading the software managed to slip through the net. One of those was Maximillian Rivkin, a man still wanted by the FBI to this day. Rivkin was what the FBI described as a criminal influencer. Anam itself had been created in 2018. An unnamed individual who'd been facing criminal charges worked with the FBI to create the software in return for a reduced sentence. It was an encrypted messaging service, marketed as being designed by criminals for criminals. The FBI had a master key that would allow them to read any message sent on the platform, but not even some of the people working on the software knew that. Rivkin also had no idea of the FBI's involvement. In the late 2010s, the more popular criminal messaging apps had been taken down by authorities, leaving criminals looking for a new way to communicate. Anam was the perfect replacement for them. Rivkin became a key player in promoting and distributing the app, but it wasn't simply a case of encouraging people to download it. He was an administrator. That meant he had the power to set up new subscriptions, remove accounts, and destroy the contents on the device. That last part was something many criminals found useful. They would contact Rivkin when their phones ended up in police custody. He would then delete everything on the device, protecting the criminal's contacts and removing evidence of illegal doings. Rivkin and his associates had no idea that the FBI had already seen everything that had been sent. In the 3 years Anam was in use, the FBI shared intelligence with law enforcement agencies around the world, allowing them to stop crimes before they happened and intercept criminals. But in June of 2021, the FBI had collected so much data that it was decided to proceed with simultaneous search warrants for hundreds of criminals. There were over 800 arrests in 16 countries, including Australia, New Zealand, and many in Europe. The criminals were mostly members of organized crime groups. Some were alleged members of an Australia-based Italian mafia, while others were outlaw motorcycle gang members, or groups involved in the distribution of illegal substances. As well as criminals, the police seized illegal substances, weapons, and more than $48 million in various currencies. Authorities also wanted to make it clear to criminals that there was no safe way for them to communicate with one another. It's possible that Anam won't be the last encryption app that's secretly operated by authorities, and criminals can no longer rely on similar apps to keep their activity a secret. Despite its success, some of the administrators managed to avoid capture. Rivkin was one of them. Rivkin is believed to be of Serbian origin, but is a Swedish national. He's already been in trouble with the law at least once. In 2019, he was ejected from Colombia during a vacation to the South American country. He'd used mind-altering substances and caused a disturbance at his hotel, as well as seeking out other illegal activities. News reports from the time didn't indicate that authorities knew Rivkin was much more involved in serious crimes. The conversations Rivkin made using the Anam app have been copied by the FBI and revealed that he was far from a simple tourist who wanted to have some fun in less than legal ways. The messages implicated him in money laundering, kidnapping, conspiracy, and conspiracy to take another person's life. He's clearly a dangerous criminal who thought nothing of helping other criminals hide their activity from authorities. His current location is unknown, but authorities believe he may have fled to Turkey. Rivkin is described as 6 foot 1 inches tall, with brown hair and brown eyes. He has a scar on his left knee and the fingers on his right hand. He has a tattoo of 3 monkeys on his right arm. There's a reward of up to $5 million for information leading to Rivkin's arrest or conviction. Tips can be sent via email at sd_Rivkin_reward@fbi.gov, or by contacting your local FBI office or the Swedish embassy. Number 3. In 2022, the FBI announced that they were searching for 4 Chinese nationals wanted for espionage-related crimes. Dong Ting, Wang Lin, Bai Hongwei, and Wang Xiong are all still at large and may never be caught. The group claimed to be members of the Institute for International Studies at China's Ocean University. The IIS describes itself as a center engaged in researching international politics and cooperating with state and provincial governments. Its website states that there are 10 researchers from within and outside the university working at the institute. Wang Lin claimed to be a director of the institute, with Dong Ting, Bai Hongwei, and Wang Xiong as his subordinates. Their academy background put them in touch with university professors in the United States, where they could discuss research. But none of the groups were actually from the IIS. Instead, they were all working for the Chinese Ministry of State Security. The MSS is a civilian intelligence agency designed to influence the foreign policy of other countries and to get information that might help the PRC. The FBI alleges that Wang Lin was a senior officer at the organization, and Dong Ting and Bai Hongwei were also intelligence officers. The FBI only states that Wang Xiong was working on behalf of the MSS. The group and other co-conspirators are believed to have been working since at least 1997, though only details of their more recent crimes were released to the public. The criminals would use their ISS role to get close to academics and professors who might have sensitive information or top-secret information. They would then try to persuade those academics to become human sources. It's much easier to convince someone who's already in a position with clearance to hand over information than it is to get someone loyal to the cause into that position. One of their targets was a former federal law enforcement officer. The target had no idea the Chinese officials were anything other than academic researchers. In 2008, he was taken on an all-expenses-paid trip to China, which he believed was being funded by the IIS. Another trip was taken in 2018. During those trips, the criminals tried to get information from him. In 2008, one of their main focuses was on protests that were being planned in the United States during the Olympic torch relay. It was thought that protests would be an embarrassment to the Chinese government, and the agents wanted to put a stop to them. Later, their interests were in fingerprint technology that was being developed in the United States. They also tried to get the target to sign a contract saying he was giving consulting services to the Chinese company that focused on national interest and the security of China. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office, when the target realized these weren't academics but actually intelligence officers, he refused their requests and contacted law enforcement. The law enforcement officer wasn't alone in being targeted. Another example revealed in the U.S. Attorney's Office release was described only as a New Jersey resident. That target was taken on a trip to the Bahamas, where he met with Wang Lin and Bai Hongwei. He was asked to get US dollars and take it to a drop-off point in New Jersey. This target did as he was asked. More details about the conspiracy were then revealed to him. It's not clear if he decided to go along with their plan, or if he rejected their offer to work more closely with the MSS. In 2020, the 4 alleged spies were charged with conspiracy to act in the United States as an illegal agent of a foreign government, and arrest warrants were issued. but by this point it was likely that all 4 were in China and unlikely to be handed over to law enforcement. Number 2. Bank robberies are the go-to crime for movies that want to depict the criminal in some kind of positive light. In recent years, bank robberies have gone out of style, and in 2020, the crime hit a 50-year low. But there are still some criminals who try to pull off the audacious act and place themselves on the list of the FBI's most wanted criminals. One of the reasons why it might have gone out of style is the fact that bank robberies have a high arrest rate, with 59% of bank robberies being solved. But one robber has managed to beat the odds and remains at large despite having committed at least 16 robberies. The criminal's identity remains a mystery, but he's been dubbed the Two Tall Bandit by law enforcement. The first robbery connected to the bandit occurred in White House, Tennessee, in November of 2009. He entered the Volunteer State Bank near closing time, carrying a weapon in one hand. The robber wore dark clothing and had his face covered with a Halloween-style mask. He threatened the bank tellers and got over the counter before demanding the money was put into the bag that he brought. The Two Tall Bandit escaped on foot, but law enforcement were never able to hunt him down. This first robbery was long cold when the Two Tall Bandit hit again. It was November of 2010, and this time the target was Gallatin, another Tennessee city that lies about half an hour's drive from White House. This robbery was carried out in much the same manner as the first. CCTV footage from this robbery has been released. Again, the bandit wore a mask that seemed to have been chosen to add to the fear the tellers would have faced. He demanded money and asked to be told about any bait money or die packs that could help law enforcement catch him. Over the next 6 years, the Two Tall Bandit hit 5 more banks and a pharmacy. Almost all the robberies were carried out in November, with the exception of one March bank robbery, one October robbery, and the attack on the pharmacy, which occurred in December of 2014. All were carried out in the same manner. At the pharmacy, the criminal demanded prescription medication instead of money, but asked that it be placed in a bag that he brought with him, just like the cash robberies. In 2016, he hit outside Tennessee for the first time, with a bank robbery in North Carolina. 9 days later, he struck at another bank, this time in South Carolina. The following year, he hit 2 more banks in Tennessee. These crimes were committed almost exactly a year after the last ones, with each only being a day off of the anniversaries of the Carolina crimes. By this point, law enforcement had managed to connect these crimes. They were too similar, and the description of the perpetrator in each robbery was almost exactly the same. Even though he went to great efforts to disguise himself, there were some things he couldn't hide. He was believed to be a male in his 40s, possibly with brown eyes, and spoke with a deep voice and a non-Southern accent. He was tall, somewhere between 6'3" and 6'8", which earned him the moniker Two Tall Bandit. He also worked with a distinctive limp that impacted his right leg. In August of 2018, it was announced that the FBI was offering a reward of $15,000 for information that could help catch the criminal. The added publicity didn't stop him from striking again. He struck earlier this time, hitting a North Carolina bank in October of 2018. In December, he struck again in North Carolina. On January 4th, a Tennessee bank was hit. Law enforcement was likely preparing for another heist that fall, but the Two Tall Bandit was mysteriously absent in the fall of 2019. In 2020, he returned, striking 2 banks in North Carolina that November. After the last 2 crimes, he again made the news as the FBI released CCTV footage from the various robberies connected to the Two Tall Bandit. In the videos, they highlighted the usual gait, hoping that it might jog someone's memories and lead to any tips. For some reason, the bandit didn't strike again in 2021 or 2022. Many have speculated about what his absence could have meant. While he seems to have gotten away with this string of robberies, he might have been imprisoned for some other crime during this time. If that's the case, it may only be a matter of time before this unknown criminal is connected to robberies. It's possible that the robber may not be from the area where the crimes were committed. Almost all the robberies have taken place in November, sometimes within days of Thanksgiving. It's possible that the criminal travels to the area for the holidays. Other special occasions might have brought him to the area at other times, accounting for the few non-November crimes. The $15,000 reward for information is still available in this case. Anybody with information can contact the FBI at 1-800-225-5324. Number 1. Raquel Sabine knew her boyfriend as a man named Paul Phillips. They were dating for 2 years and had a young daughter together. But authorities knew the man as Tyler Adams, and he had a much darker history than Raquel could have expected. Sometime in April or May of 2022, someone took Raquel's life, and the FBI is searching for Adams to ask questions about the crime. Adams was born as Kevin Schoolcraft in Pennsylvania, but officially changed his name at some point before 2009. That was when the name Tyler Adams first appeared on news websites, in reports about a series of cons that had tricked banks and ordinary people out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Adams's crimes crossed multiple states. In San Diego, he had used his mother and stepfather's identities to take out mortgages and buy 5 condos, worth more than $3 million combined. He then rented out those condos, earning a steady income, but he never paid the mortgage. When authorities visited Adams' mother and stepfather, they found the couple living in a trailer in Pennsylvania, with no idea they supposedly owned 5 condos in another state. It wasn't a mystery to them who had stolen their identities to commit fraud, but they couldn't get a hold of Adams to make him accountable. Adams moved to Hawaii, where he'd come up with another scheme to steal money. He had made up fake businesses, complete with fake checks, and used them to steal $130,000 from banks. When authorities eventually caught up with him, they found that it wasn't only his businesses that weren't as they seemed. Adams had 2 IDs from a local law school. Both IDs had his photograph, but they were registered to 2 different names, neither of which was Tyler Adams. His driver's license was under a 3rd name, which also wasn't Tyler Adams. Adams was also wanted for selling a Rolex watch online and then failing to send the item. He was arrested in 2009 and charged with 1st and 2nd degree theft. He served in San Diego and in Hawaii, but in 2019, he was 7 years into a 14-year sentence, and he disappeared. He had been a community custody inmate at the Oahu Community Correctional Facility and was regarded as very low level. As part of his sentence, he was allowed out on work schemes. In May of 2019, Adams never returned after being on contemporary release in such a scheme. The following year, a warrant was issued for his arrest. By this time, he had already started a new life. Raquel Sabine was a Navy veteran living in San Diego at the time. She already had 2 children before she met Adams, who she knew as Paul Phillips. When Adams was introduced to Raquel's family, everything seemed to be fine. He was polite and treated Raquel well, but their father noticed a few red flags. Raquel told him that he was nice when they had company, but treated her differently when they were alone. Raquel's father, David, also believed Adams was lying about who he was. He claimed to be a Mormon but didn't act like one. David pointed out the fact that he had a tattoo, which he found strange. In 2020, the couple had a daughter. Their relationship was falling apart though, and Raquel confided in friends and family that she was thinking of leaving Adams. Then on April 17, 2021, Raquel and Adams took a trip over the border to Mexico, taking their young daughter with them. They were traveling to Raquel's mother's car. It wasn't unusual for Raquel to use her mother's car, but her mother had always asked that it not be taken to Mexico as it wasn't insured there. Raquel had always followed her mother's request. It's not known if Raquel was the one driving when the car was caught on camera crossing the border. In late May, residents in Tijuana complained to authorities about a car that had been abandoned weeks earlier. There was a bad smell coming from the vehicle and nobody knew who it belonged to. The car belonged to Raquel's mother. Raquel's body was found in the trunk of the car. According to David Sabine, authorities in Mexico found CCTV footage of Adams parking the car and walking away. He was eventually found and questioned. Adams was not cooperative, but there was apparently not enough evidence to hold him or even name him as a suspect in Raquel's passing. He was still wanted by authorities in the US though. He was taken to the border where Mexican police returned his belongings to him. This included a fake ID. Adams was handed over to US Customs and Border Protection, but used his fake ID to enter the US as Aaron Bain. Adams was last seen at the San Isidro port of entry at approximately 1:30 p.m. on June 16, 2022. He's described as being 5'9", weighing approximately 175 pounds. He has swelling under his eyes and has previously undergone plastic surgery. Adams has many aliases, including Aaron Bain, David Smith, and Dominique Braun. Anyone with information should contact the San Diego FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or San Diego Crime Stoppers at 888-580-8477. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.